order for USD 230. Rachel, please collect the roll.
Mr. Updike?
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson? Mrs. Milius?
Here.
Mr. Ewing?
Here.
Mrs. Sealing? Mr. Hoffman?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Very good. Thank you. Moving on to approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's moved and seconded for approval of the agenda. Are there any comments, discussions, or appended amendments? Rachel, please collect the vote.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mrs. Milius?
Yes.
Mr. Ewing?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Updike?
Yes.
Approved.
Very good. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very good. Thank you. Moving on to the reading of our mission and vision statement. I think it's something that we need to do to hold this vision and mission statement out in front of us and freshen our minds as we move through our meeting this evening. Our vision is to maintain small town values and empower each student to achieve world-class success. Our mission is to be a school district that engages students to learn, create, adapt, and succeed in an ever-changing world. Thank you. We'll move on to business with individuals.
No cards were presented.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. On with the consent agenda, which consists of approval of the consent agenda, approval of the minutes from the July 24th, 2023 meeting and the August 4th special meeting, personnel, master services agreement, approval of the KSB policies discussed in our last meeting, and the middle school handbook revision. Any questions, discussion, or amendments?
Mr. President, I move for approval of the consent agenda as stated.
Second.
Very good. It's moved and seconded for approval of the consent agenda as stated. Any final comments or questions? Rachel, please collect the vote.
Mrs. Milius?
Yes.
Mr. Ewing?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Updike?
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Yes.
Approved.
Very good. Moving on to good news recognitions and announcements. Dr. Luttrell.
Yes, with school back in session starting tomorrow, we will once again always have quite an array of continuous good news, congratulations, and announcements each month. But until that point tomorrow, we're still kind of, as you know, during the summer, kind of, not been as active. But this school year, we will see, as we did this past year, at least once a month, a brief highlight video that shows kind of what's going on at one of our schools. And we will also have presentation at least once a month of our core value recipients. And so, again, just a lot on the horizon that we can look forward to hearing each month and recognizing our students as well as our staff achievements. I do want to point out, though, and give a shout out that we did have a very high, amazing turnout last week at our open house that was held at Forest Spring Middle School. It was the first opportunity that our patrons, parents, students, staff in general had the opportunity to get a glimpse. Went very well. I know many of you were in attendance. And again, it was really refreshing to hear just over and over again the positive comments from just anyone that, was there to look at that facility, saying everything from, it's just amazing. I like the colors, very well thought out, very, very well planned. And again, I know that our students, starting tomorrow, especially, are going to reap for years to come the benefits of that new facility, which again, we want to say thank you to our patrons for giving us the resources to have that facility all the way back as from 2018, because it was attached to that particular bond referendum. And every chance we get, we will also say that that project, like all the others of this 2018 project, came in on time and on budget. So that's my good news, recognitions, and announcements.
The only correction I would offer is that it was under budget, actually.
Oh, did I say over
Yes, you
budget?
did.
Oh,
No,
well,
you said on budget and it was actually.
Oh,
under
no,
budget.
that's correct.
I think
That's a
a
very
lot
good
of that's
point.
Due to
Say-
the administrators and the hard work and effort, time, energy and effort. that
Sorry,
they put
Doug.
into that. So it's important that we manage those resources well, and just based on the outcome of those bond issues, that they did come in under budget. So allowed us to get some other well-needed, importantly needed things. So, very good. Thank you. Moving on to our action item, which is incorporating swimming as a cooperative sport. Dr. Luttrell.
Yes, last meeting also, we had a report from our athletic director at Spring Hill High School, who has been working quite feverishly all the way back to last school year on pursuing an opportunity that would allow our high school students to participate through a cooperative with a few other school districts in the area of competitive swimming. And all the details of that were outlined last meeting. But again, here this evening before we vote, because as we said, September 1st is the kind of the deadline that we have to notify the Kansas State High School Activities Association if we are going to pursue that opportunity and be part of a cooperative agreement. As Mr. Freegon pointed out last meeting, there was a survey that was done with students last school year that not only for swimming, but some other sports and opportunities in general. And swimming did have a very high, at the time, affirmative participation rate. And so he then pursued that opportunity. And so we are here tonight asking for approval to pursue that cooperative. And again, that cooperative would be us participating with an already established program that would already have the pool, already have the coaches. We would basically, pay the fees associated to belong to that and abide by their rules and that. We would have, an individual preferably that would travel back and forth, as needed, with the group of students. But if you have any questions, Mr. Freegon is here to answer those if you would like to before you vote. And is there anything new, any new information, Mr. Freegon?
No, you did a great job. That was great.
Any questions on adding swimming as a cooperative activity? So go ahead.
This would be for 4 years.
It's actually a 2-year. It's a 2-year, but that's 4 years is what Dr. Luttrell felt like would be a comfortable, and we did as well. I mean, it's as we talked, we felt like a 4-year plan would be good to kind of see where we're at that time. But it is a 2-year. What we'll be signing is a 2-year agreement to be a part of the cooperative.
Okay, so there's some sort of contract that's going to come up.
Yeah, and that's what he was referring to. That's the September 1st deadline. And actually, and I've already notified Keisha, so they actually already sent me like paperwork. And it's online now. So you just fill it out online and it'll be all we need to do.
Good.
Mr. President, I move that we approve incorporating swimming as a cooperative sport.
Second the motion.
It's moved and seconded to incorporate swimming as a cooperative sport to our activities. Any comment, discussion, or questions? Rachel, please collect the vote.
Mrs. Milius,
Yes.
Mr. Ewing,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes,
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
approved.
very good.
Thank you.
It'll be fun. Moving on to discussion items. Our first discussion item of the evening is the pre-budget workshop highlights. Dr. Luttrell?
Yes, we are we are definitely into the budget approval process. And our next two meetings after this evening, there will be activities such as an actual formal budget hearing. There'll be an opportunity later where people can come and speak about the proposed budget, and then end with, of course, voting on approval of the fiscal year 24 budget, as well as which would establish our mill rate for the fiscal year. And so this evening, our Director of Finance, Doug Swin, who's been, our person that has held this responsibility and done a great job of it for nearly right at 20 years, I believe, Mr. Swin. And so he is here this evening and just going to kind of give you a brief walkthrough of kind of some of the things that we've done to prepare as we head into the budget workshop season, as well as to kind of give an overview of what you can expect the next two sessions. So, Mr. Swin, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. It has been 20 years and I appreciate you making me feel very old. So, but yeah, tonight's just a teaser. So we're not going to dive headfirst into all the numbers, which is the reason why I labeled it a pre-budget workshop. In 2 weeks, I'm going to give you a lot more numbers, but we thought tonight would be a good night to just cut out a couple items, kind of go through them. And then if you have any questions that you would really like me to hit upon in 2 weeks, I'll put those on my list and we'll get answers for you and make sure you understand everything that's going on. So, all right. So tonight's agenda is really short. I'm going to talk about the calendar. It is budget season. It's my favorite time of the year. I get to play in all kinds of numbers. We'll talk just a little bit about COLA. Now that it's official, I want to kind of show you the numbers one last time before we move on from that. I do have some mill levy projections for you as far as what we can expect. And then I think it's important we wrap up with some of the challenges we do face. So, calendar. Normally I wouldn't be talking tonight, but again, I'm going to cover a few items to hopefully simplify the next two meetings. But tonight, there's no action to take place. It's all discussion. I've already told you what I'm going to cover. In 2 weeks, I'm going to come back and we're going to meet at 6:30, which is what we always do for the budget workshop. There will be action required that night. You'll have to approve the notification for the revenue neutral rate hearing and also the budget hearing. So there's two documents that will have to be approved in 2 weeks. And then obviously at that meeting, I'm going to go over all the budget details for you and answer all your questions. Then we'll come back in 2 weeks, 9/11, and there's action to be taken that night. You will need to, after the hearing concludes for the revenue neutral rate, there will need to be a vote on that. There's a resolution that you must pass because we will be exceeding the revenue neutral rate. And then after the budget hearing, you will adopt the budget. So there's two action items that night. I will give a brief presentation both before the revenue neutral hearing and also the budget hearing, but that'll be a condensed version. So any questions on what lies ahead? All right, so let's talk about a few pieces tonight. COLA. There's a lot of numbers here, and I'm not going to go through them, but I think it's important if you have a math teacher say, I want to see your work, this is the method behind the madness. So as I look at this picture, it goes back to 2018-19, and it carries us clear out to 32-33. Once we get to 32-33, can't believe I'm even saying that. By that time, there won't be any of our extraordinary growth, and we would be totally dependent on COLA at that time, unless we build more facilities, which is probably going to happen between now and then. So that's all the math. And at the bottom, you can see how much we're levying based on how much authority we have. But I think a picture is worth a lot more. So let's go to the pictures. So here is a picture of our authority without if COLA never happened. You will see that our authority for these extraordinary growth applications that we've had approved by the state is going to rapidly taper off, and by 32, 33 will be gone. And you'll see how all the different ones just kind of flow right off. Now, what COLA is going to do is going to give us an opportunity to fill that gap. It's going to be, we can level that off and transition from our dependency on extraordinary growth to being more reliant on COLA, which is consistent with every other district in Johnson County, which is the next slide. You will see that based on the 2022-2023 budget, the hearings of my colleagues in Johnson County, every one of them, except us, was levying in the COLA option, and I put in the dollar amounts that they were levying. So our goal is we will look very similar to this in a couple of years, where we're not relying so heavily on extraordinary growth, but instead we'll be levying in COLA. I think that's my last slide on COLA. So let's pause there. Do you have any questions? It has been our 30-day protest period is expired. I have got confirmation from the Johnson County Election Office that nobody protested it. So it is official. We could levy 0, or we can levy, I think it's up to 3 or 4 mills, but I'll go over that the next meeting. So.
Could you name off what those districts are, the numbers?
Oh, yeah. 229 Blue Valley. 231 is Gardner. 232 is DeSoto. 233 is Olathe. And last but not least is Shawnee Mission, 512. So you can see the big 3, they stick out. Blue Valley, Olathe, Shawnee Mission, they're all up there with pretty sizable amounts. But DeSoto, you see they're levying about 2.2 million in there. They're still a little bit bigger than us though. So good question. Anything else on COLA before we move on?
I have 2 questions.
Yes.
I forgot, what is the max amount you can levy in COLA?
COLA is all dependent upon your wealth. So the wealthier you are, the more you can levy. And I believe we hit the max, which is like 5%. And then that translates into dollars. So there is a cap there. You just can't levy whatever you want. And you got to be aware of, if for some reason your value goes down in comparison to everybody else, that amount could decrease in the following year. So
Okay.
I believe, and I don't have it in front of me, we're either second or third highest as far as home values in the state of Kansas.
Yep. The second question was extraordinary growth on Forest Spring. We are not able to get any in 23, 24, same as how the funding works?
We really don't want to get it in 23, 24 because with this, we really don't need it in 23, 24. So if we wait and ask for it to be effective for 24, 25, then our 8-year clock starts.
Otherwise,
So-
you're wasting a half a year.
You're wasting a full year.
A full year. Okay.
So that's kind of intentional. It's because that declines over time. If we layer it in a year later, it just buys us a little more time.
Okay.
So hopefully that in the long game, I don't think that's going to matter because I think in there'll probably be something else added and we can get that authority and kind of backfill. But for now, it wasn't needed for this year.
Got it. Thanks.
Good questions. Anything else on COLA? All right, let's talk about the mill levy. Last year, I shared this slide with you. I said, it is very unfortunate. We are the second highest mill levy in Johnson County, and we're 8th highest in the state. You'll see that our colleagues, our Johnson County colleagues that are highlighted in blue aren't terribly far behind us, 23rd, 27th, 43rd, and then Shawnee Mission, they drop way down there to 135th. And this year I've added a new slide. Unfortunately, Olathe did lower their mill levy significantly last year. Even though we had a slight decrease, they had a bigger decrease. So we're now the highest mill levy in Johnson County. And the 5 below us. Olathe comes in at 16, all the way down to Shawnee Mission at 167. I do think it's important to give perspective, though. I know, as we said here today, I'm not happy that we're the highest in Johnson County. I wish that wasn't so, but history, there's always different number ones. And I think this slide tells a lot. This takes us clear back to 06, 07, not quite to the beginning of my career, but 06, 07. And you'll see some of these districts, some of our colleagues have really had fluctuating mill levies, way up, way down, and up and down, up and down. I've always tried to keep it as stable as possible. And if you look at the purple one, you'll see that we did have a little bit of a bump there in 07, 08. And then we had a nice solid decline for, I think it was 13-year stretch. And then after 2 no increase mill levies, we did finally, with the last one, did have to raise the mill levy 4 mills, just over 4 mills. And since then, we've been trying to taper it off. So obviously, we're nowhere near what Shawnee Mission is doing. They're the bottom one, but I'd put our numbers up over the last 10 years with any of the other ones. And I feel like we've been very, very responsible and tried to done the most with the least amount of resources. So it is important to note that if you look at Gardner, which is green, and DeSoto, which is red, when they were in their growth spurts about 10 years ago, they had the number 1 and number 2 mill levies in the state. It's just, if you're rapidly growing, it's hard. It is, because you got a lot of debt to take care of. But you'll see when they were in their peak, they were up over 80 mills. And here we're in our peak, and we're down in the 60s. So I think there's a lot to be said there. Again, not happy with the number 1 spot, but that's where we're at. I'm confident, though, over time, as we pay off debt, I think 10 years from now, we definitely won't be in the number 1 spot. I can almost guarantee that. And things will look a lot differently. As far as what our mill levy is looking like, and I will go into more detail with more slides next meeting. Right now, it's looking at a 0.2 mil decrease. 0.2 mil decrease. Last year was 67.406, and it's projected to be 67.198. So I was able to get it to go down. I wanted it to go down more. We could have made it go down more had we got current year funding. I don't want to go there because that's still a sore spot for me. And what really hurt us was the opening of Forest Spring. Beautiful building. We've staffed it with a lot of great people. It doesn't come for free. So unfortunately, opening a new building is extremely costly. Otherwise, we could have probably lowered our mill levy a little more this year. So that's what I have for mill levy. And I promise to go in a lot more detail next time. Do you have any questions on it, though, for tonight?
I just want to back you up. When Doug and I got on the board in 2011, we were the lowest. And we weren't building at the speed they were building buildings. Number 4 on the list is Iola, and they're a small district. They just built a whopper of a school. Yeah. So the builders are the ones got to take the heat somewhere, I guess.
Yeah.
So, Doug, I don't know whether you might talk about this with challenges, but I know we did. I'm assuming everybody else got their little tax statement thing. Could you just give like a, bird's eye view of kind of what that said and what it didn't say?
Yeah.
Is that fair to do right now?
I actually was prepared for that question.
Okay.
I was kind of hoping you wouldn't ask it, but I am prepared. I got the districts in the mail today, which is weird because last year, I don't know that we got one as a district who owns property, but this year we did. So, yeah, it is. it's very misleading. You're referring to the revenue neutral rates and what everybody's proposing as far as a mill levy.
Right.
And what it should be if we were all of us were trying to be revenue neutral.
Right.
Well, I have one here. This is for a property that would pay districts, pay taxes in the city of Spring Hill. Keep in mind, there's a bunch of different taxing entities within our district, whether you live on the Miami County side or Johnson County side. And I don't know how many different taxing districts are in our school district, but I know there's multiple ones. But I pulled one for Spring Hill residents. I think this would be on the Johnson County side. And what it says is the revenue neutral rate would have been 121 mills. Now, I don't have these numbers in front of me, but I think for the last 10 years, I don't think the combined mill levy has ever been 121 mills. I think it's been much higher than that. So, yes, this area benefited from some very high assessed valuation growth, but I don't think any of these entities that are on the list is going to be able to be revenue neutral. I could be wrong, but it gives you a breakdown. So like the state of Kansas is levying 1.5 mills. That's set by statute. That's not going to change. The state doesn't have to do anything on that. They're going to levy 1.5 mills. Johnson County. So yes, this would be somebody in Spring Hill on the Johnson County side. They must have published a proposed mill levy rate. And again, we all published proposed mill levy rates. And we all estimated a little high so that when we got our numbers put together, if we needed to go up, we could. But if we needed to go down, we could as well. When I stood before you and told you what we were going to publish, I told you it was probably 2 mills high, and it was 2 mills high. So what we shared, which is going to be shared on this document, is higher than what I'm proposing we adopt. Johnson County was showing 17.495 is what they're looking at for this year. But to be revenue neutral, they'd have to drop it to 15.96. And then there's Johnson County Community College, Johnson County Parks and Rec, the city of Spring Hill. It looks like they published a mill levy of 41 mills, but for them to be revenue neutral, they'd have to drop it all the way to 31.445. And we know with the growth in Spring Hill, that's not a reality. That's the key thing you need to remember with revenue neutral. It's basically saying you need to live off the same money this year as you lived off of last year. It has nothing to do with the mill rate. Same. So if you got $10 million, you need to live off of $10 million this year, whatever that rate mill levy translates into. And just from inflation alone, I don't see that as a reality. I think the only way you can make it happen is if you're a declining district, you were getting to benefit from using your numbers from 2 years ago. And so you're declining. So maybe you're, got rid of some staff, riffed some staff that left, and you didn't fill those positions, but yet you're getting the same amount of money you got 2 years ago. Maybe in that case, you could be revenue neutral. I went to a budget workshop in Girard, and I'm guessing there was 50 districts represented there. There was a show of hands of anybody that was going to be revenue neutral this year or thought they might be. One district raised their hand out of 50. So it's just, especially in today's economic climate, I don't know that it's achievable. So anyhow, if you add up all the proposed ones, which is in this letter, it says that we're looking at a mill rate of 147.519, where the revenue neutral rate would only be 121.032. That's a difference of 26 mills. That looks gigantic. That looks like everybody's going crazy. But the truth of the matter is, if you looked at the mill rates from last year and added them all up, this taxing entity, it was at 141 last year. It wasn't at 121. But I get the fact, if your home value is going up 10, 15%, you would hope that your taxes, your mill rate would go down. Not necessarily your taxes, but your mill rate go down. So And I can definitely go into, if this is important to you and you're getting a lot of questions on it, I'm happy to, if I haven't answered your questions, go into it. I'll make a point of addressing it further in 2 weeks. Would you like me to do that? Or
I'll look at mine. It came in the mail. If I
Okay.
do, I'll let you know.
And let me know if you're
I
getting a
think
lot of
I'm-
questions, and if you have some that you don't feel comfortable answering, send them my way. And the other thing I forgot to mention is this revenue neutral rate is based on the district's assessed valuation and not based on an individual's assessed valuation. Because I know for me personally, after some very, very large assessed valuation increases on my home in Spring Hill, this year I got a relatively tiny one. I'm thankful. I'm guessing I'll get hit up big next year instead. But because I only had a small little increase in assessed valuation, if the overall mill levy stays relatively flat or for the school district going down, I'll actually be paying less taxes to the school district than I did last year. So for me, being almost flat is a decrease in taxes for me. I'm revenue neutral. I don't have to pay more in because the value of my home didn't skyrocket. I know a lot of people, their home skyrocketed. So, and mine has too in previous years. Does that kind of frame it for you?
Thank you.
And I know I seen on the news one night, the appraiser's office was throwing all the levying entities under the bus, and all the levying entities like us, we throw the appraiser's office under the bus. I can't control home values. I try to help control the mill levy and make sure we're not levying any more than we have to. But in a growing district, you're going to need more to spend than you did the year before, which is why revenue neutral is not even a blip possible. So, all right. Here comes the challenges if you're ready. So these aren't new. You've seen them before. I've put some mill levies to them. Just for those of you that are thinking, darn it, I wish we could lower the mill levy a little more this year, and I wish we could. Delayed enrollment. Had we got current year funding this year, which we got so close. I mean, we got really, really close. It was really exciting. I have estimated the numbers I threw out for tonight, 150 more kids, which I think we're going to do that. We might actually do a little more than that. 150 kids would have equaled over $1 million, and $1 million would have translated to a 2.11 mil decrease this year. Okay. So when I say current year, now I'm not saying we would have just grabbed all that current year money and hit it. But if we did, we could have reduced the mill levy another 2.11 mils. The middle one, the state aid calculation. Sadly, the only debt that we have that's still getting state aid is the old stuff. Anything that we have issued after 2015 is now at 0. Last year was 12, this year 0 because of the growth in assessed valuation. So our post debt, we're still going to get 49%. That's down from 54 last year. But if all of our debt was at the same rate, 49%, if it all was at the same amount, we would have 3.8 million more coming in for state aid to pay off our debt. And right there, we could have dropped at 8 mils. Huge. But they changed the formulas on us. So that's not a reality. And the one that really burns me, and sadly, it's only the rapidly growing districts that care, is this new facility weighting. New facility weighting was in the formula for many, many years. The reason why is because it is expensive to open new buildings. It's terribly inefficient to open new buildings because you don't want to open it and then fill it with all the kids. Then they have nowhere to go the next year. So you open a building, it's only half full, but you're paying full utilities and you pretty much got it almost fully staffed. You don't put in a half principal and a half secretary, even though the numbers aren't there. So the legislators recognized that, and there was a new facility waiting. It gave us just a little bit of money to help when you open a new building and you're bringing in new kids. So if you look at Forest Spring Middle School, assuming they have an enrollment of about 280 this year, that alone would have brought in almost little over $473,000 to us, which would equate to about $1 million. So just that little piece alone, which is great for rapidly growing districts and no longer exists, cost us $1 million. So I hope that someday we see changes to all this. We're fighting real hard for the first one. I think we got a really good chance of current year funding this year, or getting it passed, not for this year, but for next year. New facility waiting, that's just not on anybody's radar. I keep hoping like Blue Valley or Olathe has a huge growth spurt, because if we just had one big district, they'd have their lobbyists all over this and it'd get passed. We're small. We just don't have anybody big to help carry that torch. So those are the challenges we face. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And if you have anything you really want to hit upon in 2 weeks, I'll be happy to write it down and bring it back to you.
When did the new facility waiting go away?
Oh, it has been, I think prior to block grant, I think it might have ended with block grant funding.
That sounds right.
Yeah, when we got frozen and then we got the new formula, it just went away and it was on nobody's radar. Now, if you look at what that alone has cost us, I think, and I'll probably have that slide for you in 2 weeks. I want to say it's close to $2 million. So when I share next week or in 2 weeks our cash balances, and I'm telling you, they're still not where I want them to be. If we just had that one little piece, it'd be a much different boat. And it's gone. And I don't think we'll ever get it back. So very disappointing, especially with it being in there for so many years.
I know at one time the enrollments statewide were either steady or dropping. Is that still the case, or is the state overall growing again?
No. In fact, I can bring back a slide on that, because the state does release, there's a couple of sources that do their projections. The last one I looked at had a very slow decline over the next 5 years. So overall, the state, I don't know if some of the recent economic development that's happened in the state might change those projections. But the last couple of years, as I've been watching it, the state numbers have been slowly going down.
So is it accurate to say that then that's why they would give you those new facility waiting and some of that extraordinary growth, because the kids were somewhere and now they're here, kind of thing?
Yeah.
It would seem to make sense, the first year funding and everything, with if most districts are declining, that
it doesn't really cost them anything, right?
Right.
And it's only when you're opening a new facility. It's not when you're renovating one. You can't just go in and do a bunch of painting and all that and go, oh, new facility. It's got to be a brand new facility. So you're right. There's not a lot of districts that are building lots of buildings. So really the cost here is very minimal. We would stand to be the biggest district that would have benefited from that.
Mm-hmm.
Good questions. Anything else?
Appreciate you explaining that very well, Doug. Well done.
And I look forward to bringing back a whole bunch more numbers next go around. It'll be fun. We'll dive in. I'll share a lot with you. But if you think of something you really want to know, send me an email, call me, let me know, and I will get it into the presentation. So thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you, Doug. Moving on to the the next discussion item is moving on to Kaufman Real World Learning Data Sharing Agreement.
Yes, Dr. Robinson's going to briefly just kind of, if you remember we were recipients of a real world learning grant through the Kauffman Foundation, which is a 3-year commitment. Most school districts within the Johnson County, as well as the Jackson County metropolitan area, have been a part of this initiative, which is aimed at providing credentials, marketing credentials to students while they are in high school, preparing them, for the world of work with real certifications. And part of that agreement, as you know, provided funds for us to have an individual that would have oversight of that program. But of course, like anything with that, they want to make sure that they are able to review data that indicates that progress and opportunities that our students are being given and that they're being successful in, so they can see the return on that investment that they're providing. And to do that, we have to sign and provide some data sharing agreement, a data sharing agreement, which is again does not identify specific students by name, but Dr. Robinson is going to talk to you about briefly as to what that entails.
Yeah, Dr. Luttrell gave a pretty good overview. I think more than anything, we wanted to make sure you all had a chance to review it. Mr. Goheen has reviewed it compared to our other data sharing agreements. We got word about a month ago that we were receiving about $330,000 from the Kauffman Foundation for us to be able to finish up that grant application process. The data sharing agreement is a requirement. Annually, usually in August, they will be asking us for the previous year's data. And really what they're looking for is kind of cumulative numbers based on how many students have earned the different type of market value assets. So how many students did we have that earned a specific endorsement? How many of them completed a certificate program? How many of them completed internships, et cetera? No identifiable student information will be shared. All of it will be replaced with a research number for them to track. What we've seen the last 2 years from the Kauffman Foundation is they will take all of this data and they will do a combined data analysis for the whole Kansas City metro area. And what they're starting to look at is based on the trends at high schools across the Kansas City metro, are we graduating enough students with specific endorsements or specific market value assets to meet the market demands for employment? And so they'll give us some feedback that way. It will also be utilized to guide higher ed and other industry as they're moving forward. So we will get feedback from them as to how our data compares, but really probably the greater benefit is really looking at how we contribute to the Kansas City metro area. So, if you have any questions, I can answer.
So this is just to make sure I have this, no identifiable information of an individual student would be transferred or shared.
No, it'll have no names or identifiable information. All of that will be replaced like any other. If you think of it more as a research study, Leah Good and a couple members of the high school team are already preparing some of the data pending board approval, just because this will be our first go round in providing it. I would tell you our data will get cleaner each year. Part of this first year of the grant is really looking at what the best system is for tracking our market value asset data. A lot of it currently they're tracking by hand in individual courses. So it'll help us to clean that data up a little bit, both for ease of sharing it with the Kauffman Foundation, but also as the new graduation requirements go into place, we'll be reporting similar data to KSDE. So in a matter of a couple of years, the data that Kauffman is requesting would be available by the public. So.
Any other questions for Dr. Robinson?
Will this come back for an action item next meeting, or we have
Yes.
to approve it, right?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to our next discussion item is overview of work being done on completing open enrollment transfer guidelines for 24-25.
Yes, Dr. Robinson's going to remain at the podium because he's going to also give some insight. As you know, state statute will go into effect this time next year that will allow districts to set capacity guidelines to possibly accept out-of-district students and or allow opportunity for students that reside outside of a district boundary that they currently live to attend another school district if space permits and there's an application process. Those guidelines and policies have to be approved no later than early January of 2024. In the meantime, in the interim, our district has been taking steps for quite some time behind the scenes, having dialogue and trying to determine what our draft policy might look like. And so Dr. Robinson is going to provide a overview of what the timeline is that we've established in drafting our policy and bringing it to you for input, and then allowing it up time for also to be formally approved. Our goal is that we can bring well, I don't want to steal his thunder, but our main goal is that our current, since it has to be approved by sometime in early January, that the current Board of Education that's in place, that, you know, will be privy to all those discussions, that we can approve that prior to the time that, you know, there's any turnover and reorganization. But Dr. Robinson, you can take a few moments and describe our process.
Yeah, tonight my intention was to stay pretty high level. And I mentioned to Rachel beforehand, I'll answer any questions you have tonight as we go. I would say some of this, we're going to learn a whole lot more over the next couple of weeks. We're seeing some of the first districts, typically it's smaller systems, that are posting their hearings. They're doing them alongside their budget hearings. And so we'll get a glimpse at what some of the smaller districts, how they handle the actual policy piece. KSB has provided us with a draft recommendation. And then we're also in collaboration right now with the other Johnson County schools and watching closely with what they're doing and how they're managing their piece. So I'll go a little bit over tonight what's required in statute and a little bit into the timeline that we're proposing, which should ensure that we meet the January 1st deadline without any difficulty. So there's two things required in the statute. One, it's required that the Board of Education adopts a policy. We currently have a policy, JBC, that covers enrollment. That policy will stay, and it will address residential enrollment. So our students who live within our boundaries, this is how enrollment will be managed. This new policy will be to guide completely your non-residential, so your individuals from outside of the district. Right now, if you think about our out-of-district transfer policy, it essentially goes away and is replaced by this process. So when we get to the point of looking at it, currently the draft that KSB provided is 6 pages long, because it not only outlines the complete lottery process, how we'll notify parents of the seats we have available, how we'll make selection, and some of that is in statute. So some of that we don't have to decide. Some of it we will use our district leadership team to really nail down what processes we already have in place and will work for us. But if you think about it, we will essentially be creating a new policy that will govern how we manage the enrollment of residential students. The other thing that's required with this is for the board to hold a hearing. So if you think about it, similar to the process that Mr. Schwinn just provided with the budget, I'll get to the timeline in a minute, but we will have to post 2 weeks in advance, have to put it on our website. There's real clear in statute what's required from a notice standpoint. But the hearing is essentially for us to go over our capacity guidelines and how those were determined. So at that meeting, you would have the opportunity for someone representing the board, likely me or another member of our staff, going through the rationale for how we determine classroom capacity If you think about it, we already have some numbers that we utilize for determining staffing. This will look a little bit different. And we'll get to some of that down the road, but not only are we looking at classroom capacity, but we also need to look at our specialized programs. So what is our capacity within our ELL program? What is our capacity within a resource room compared to our autism programs? Are there some differences that committee sees? So there'll be a need throughout to bring in various stakeholder groups to really look at their specific areas of expertise. We're also watching really closely what guidance is put out from KSDE. I think one of the concerns that our team has in particular is really making sure that our policy can withstand any criticism of discrimination. And that'll be most critical as we look at capacity for our special education and ELL and some of those, how we write that. The other challenge for capacity for us will be planning for growth. And while we may have room at the elementary and the middle school level right now, still with where our high school capacity is sitting, trying to make sure, because once we accept a student in that's non-residential, we can't kick them out in 2 or 3 years because we don't have room. So essentially, once you say, yes, you can attend within one of our USD230 schools, they can stay until they graduate, is the way it's written in the statute. So our situation, just because of the growth, is more complex than a lot of others. But I think we've already seen a couple of districts in similar size that have how they're looking at their policy. And I think there's some ways that we can do it. We can do it and protect our district and yet still allow for us to manage it well within, within the law. So there will be a need for a hearing. The process, how we're planning to manage it, is kind of to break it into 3 parts. We have a pretty good draft from KSB, and most of the districts that I've been in communication are looking at staying pretty close from a process standpoint to the KSB recommendation, in part because a large piece of it comes from statute. So the things that we could adjust are minimal. We will take that through our district leadership team, which really includes our building principals and our directors, and really revise the process part of this with that team. Really where we'll need input from stakeholders will be on the capacity piece. And that'll be the more time consuming piece where we'll look at projections, we'll look at best practice, we'll look at really how we're currently staffing. There will also be a need to involve teachers from the association and make sure there's a clear understanding of how we're setting our numbers and why we are, just to avoid any challenges with this in the future. And then when we get to the hearing aspect of it, we will handle it in 2 meetings similar to the budget. So my intention would be that October 23rd meeting, we would come back and we'd go through a lot of, more similar to what Doug did tonight, a lot of the definitions, a lot of the nuts and bolts of the statute, the work that's been done, and give you a pretty good framework as to where we see things going with the policy. And then coming back at the November meeting, and asking for you to hold the hearing and approve the policy that evening. The reason for that timeline would be that if there is something that the board would like more information on, we would still have the December meeting to still stay within the statutory requirements. So that's kind of a really high level overview. I'm sure there are lots of questions. I'm happy to answer what I can. And I also talked with Mrs. Henderson beforehand that if you have questions after tonight or suggestions for the process, if you could send them to her as well, we'll start making a list, because this is going to be a new process for all of us to work through. But what questions can I try to answer for you this evening?
Do you have any idea on how many students we could lose from this process? Is there any way of telling that?
No, and the other piece we don't have a great picture of yet is how all of the other Johnson County districts are going to manage it. Going into this, I would have anticipated that we would lose as much as we could stand to gain, that you may trade some students out on the boundaries, and that's just looking at some other states where open enrollment has been in place. But I don't know that you've got a good a good picture of what we stand to lose. I think it should push us even further though. I mean, when you talk about trying to provide high quality programming and making sure we're putting our best foot forward moving forward, it's going to get a whole lot more competitive. And that's not necessarily a bad thing for us when we're trying to raise the level of expectations throughout the district.
I think that was one of the most common arguments for it, was to create kind of that competition, if you will. I hate that word, but just to drive excellence really in all districts. So,
You know, my only worry with that is right now they're probably more than what people understand. There's a pretty collaborative approach, both with the other schools in the Frontier League, but especially in the Johnson County area between districts. And I just hope it doesn't impact that, because, you know, right now there's a lot that our curriculum team relies on the other curriculum teams for feedback and input, and they do the same for us. There's good communication between our HR teams. And you just hope that as, you know, the competition increases for students, that it doesn't damage those relationships that are kind of behind the scenes, but are really good for kids as well.
right. So I know some people might not be very familiar with this, but just to be clear, the money follows the student. So
Not yet.
or that's the intention,
It would follow it a year. This is part of the current year
right?
funding, is it would follow it a year delay.
Right.
Um,
So with that, I have talked to Adam Thomas, he helped write this and is available. He wanted everyone to know, if you have questions for him, please call him. One of the things that I'm not clear on in that is because of that year delay and because of our growth. This is tricky. It is really tricky, but is there availability that we can set parameters in there? Meaning if somebody does just choose to come to Spring Hill, they need to commit to 2 years or 4 years or whatever, and the other direction. If you leave our district, can we have parameters in there like that? I just am worried about the size.
It's a good question. I think it's one that we could have Greg Goheen dig a little deeper for us, just to make sure. Everything I've seen in statute so far, and that's just my surface level understanding of it, is that once you enroll and once you allow them in, that you're not able to remove them from your system. I think the other piece we've been able to see, at least one district is considering, they are setting their capacity numbers without getting too far into that tonight, where they're saying, you know, we've got room at our elementary, but we need to save 20% of that for growth and so much for staff, children and things like that. So I think we're going to see over the next month, I think we're going to see some real creative ways of navigating this. I know Dr. Luttrell's already talked to a couple of districts that are in similar situations to us, that they're growing and looking at how to manage this. So I think there'll be a lot of collaboration between systems. You know, but I'll ask for Mr. Goheen to dig a little deeper into that
I'm just curious about that. I read it the same way that you did, that we would be committed to keeping them as a district, would be committed to that, but I don't know what the commitment is from them.
I can't imagine that you could ever tell somebody that lives in your district that they can't come if they transferred out, that they can't come back.
Right.
Because you're statutorily obligated
Right.
to educate every student that lives in your district. So,
But if they're
that would be-
coming to our district, I wonder
Right.
if you can tell them that it's like a 2-year commitment or something, just so that to plan for staffing and.
The other piece of clarification is whatever we set our capacity numbers at, it's really driving students coming from the outside in. So if all of a sudden we saw new housing development go up over the summer, and all of a sudden one of our schools is higher than that capacity number, your students that live in district, you can go over capacity. It's not ideal, but the capacity piece that you're setting is protecting you from that influx of students that might overwhelm your system. So that's where it's going to get trickier, even with our association, to explain those numbers.
For sure. Have we heard anything from Keisha at all, what they are considering with this?
No, I think so. Most of what we've received at this point from Keisha has been related to the private school participation piece. I know they've had discussions. I just don't know if they've finalized anything. Probably the biggest question for us will be, will they require students to sit out a year if they move
Right.
systems? The last I heard was yes, they were, because it wasn't a bona fide move, which is what's in their guidelines, that it was a move, it was moved by choice, which is there currently. So there are districts that have had open enrollment, open boundaries for years. And so that piece is not new. If I chose to move my girls to play sports in another district because of it being a more competitive team, but I don't physically move myself, I have to sit out a year. Everything we've heard so far suggests that Keisha will follow that guideline. So if we have a student that's attending in Blue Valley currently and chooses to place their student here for whatever reason, they would likely have to sit out a year. But we'll watch and see what Keisha does with that over the course of the school year.
It sounds like this policy could be one of our most important policies that we have.
Definitely.
And I'm glad we got a little bit of leeway with it. I haven't seen the draft one. Could you get that to us?
Yep, I could send the draft of what KSB has provided. It will look very different by the time it comes to you in November.
So I have a question as we're setting capacity limits. Do you get to set them by school and by grade?
You get to set, we can probably set them however we want. I think I'm trying to remember what the wording is in statute. I have to look, but essentially you could look at each school and set your own capacities. With a larger system, my suggestion would be that we look at some equity, just so that we know at all of our elementaries at K2, this is our capacity number. At 3.5, this is our number. We have some numbers already that we use internally to drive staffing decisions, which is a good thing. Some of that is built on best practice. So we should be able to use some of that as a starting point. The places that we don't will be when you start looking at some of your more specialized programs. And so we'll have to look a little bit more at what research studies are out there to kind of guide that piece. I know Mrs. Jados and her team have already been putting some thought to this. The other conversation we've had a lot is that wasn't real clear from KSDE are those students who are attending at outside placements like Gillis and Lake Mary, and how they're going to be handled in all of this. So we'll continue to get some guidance from KSDE and from our legal counsel on how to incorporate that into these guidelines.
I think that was my next question is, if we're able to do that, are we able to then set capacity limits on our special services? So if a student requires special services, and if money's following that, like who pays for all of that above and beyond? Is that us? Is that their home district? Where does that lie?
Yeah. Well, my understanding is that yes, we can set capacity numbers based on staffing and what we can maintain, as long as we're applying them equally. From a financial standpoint, my understanding again is once we enroll them as a student, there are students in their home district where they live no longer matters. We've now enrolled them. Any financial costs we encumber because of their needs would be our responsibility. I think it's an area for us to dig a lot deeper in over the next month with Mr. Goheen, just in how we set that. And even how much information we collect before we do the whole lottery system that will be needed to select students. Because I think that's the piece where districts are going to run into some discriminatory practices. So I think how we set up that process piece is going to be just as important as our capacity numbers. But a lot of that work we'll do with Greg and his team.
Kind of piggybacking on that, or when this opens, are you enrolling in the district or a specific school? I mean, do they get to pick which school they attend, or do we dictate where they go?
It'll be up to our procedures, but really my recommendation, I'm getting way ahead of things, would be that they're enrolling in the district and we assign where space is available. It will also force us to revise our in-district transfer procedures. Again, try not to get too far into the policy. But if I remember right, May 1st, we have to notify the community as to how many seats we have open at each school. In order to do that, we're going to need to complete a large part of our in-district transfer by that May 1st deadline, which will make my summer a whole lot more enjoyable to have that wrapped up. But it will mean we need to move our timeline up and make sure we're notifying parents early. So we'll bring a lot of that with this policy to the board so you can consider it all at one time.
Seems like there's always a loophole. I hope someone in the state finds one,
Yeah.
for just minor details.
I expect this to create some real challenges for schools in a lot of different ways. I don't know that it's all bad in the long run, but I think at least in the first year or two, like anything new, it's going to create some challenges. I just hope the legal pieces are somebody else's to work through the first time, and we'll watch what they do and make adjustments. So
It's interesting that you mentioned the collaborative versus competitive, because I think those of us that have been around for a while saw an atmosphere here some time ago where things were more competitive in nature, with sharing between principals. And I think we're a lot better when we've been more collaborative. It's made our whole district better versus the other way. So it'll definitely be a concern and something to look at.
the longer I'm here, you'll learn how competitive I am. But I do think education is one of those fields that the more we can lean on each other and learn from other districts, I think it makes our system better. We want to set Spring Hill apart, and we want it to be the best district in the area. But we don't want to do it at the detriment of the other districts around us. And so I think there's a way to accomplish both.
I do too. I think, Sharon, you mean within the district, though. There was competitiveness
Oh.
within Spring Hill. And so now we've really seen a great growth and collaboration between specifically elementary schools. Of course, there haven't been that many middle schools until now, but I agree. Thank you for bringing this. I feel like it has felt, when I called Dr. Luttrell about it a few weeks ago, I feel like it feels down the line, but really this is 1 year from right now that is in place. And so in order to help prepare for staffing, I think this just is good to have conversation to educate not only us, but whoever's listening. People can start to read and look on board docs and understand what's going on.
And I think Brent's suggestion, I will go ahead and send to Dr. Luttrell KSB's policy recommendation. I would again remind you, it won't look that way when it comes to you in October, November, but it will give you a pretty good picture of what topics we'll be kind of wrestling with behind the scenes, and may help generate some other questions for you over time. The other thing related to policy that I would mention, just because I've got the microphone, is I mentioned at the last meeting that we were working on getting our policy library into board docs. It is live and active. So if you have a policy you're searching for, you can access it there. There's still some cleanup we'll be doing over the next couple of weeks, but it is usable and there for both the board and the public to be able to utilize. We'll move these new policies that you approved tonight over for the first time. So we'll hopefully we don't mess it up in that process. But do you have other questions I can answer?
I can look this up, but if you happen to have a copy of the House Bill 2567 and the Senate 113 to add
Sure.
with that email,
Yep.
that'd be great.
And this is a 5-month thing. It's not a year from now. It's,
Yes.
Yeah.
we have to have policies and our processes in place within 5
Yeah.
months. That's a very short time frame.
Yep.
That's exactly
January
what, that was
1st.
kind of my point.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like if we don't start really talking about this early on, I just didn't want it to be a surprise for everybody in October or,
Right.
Yeah.
No, I think you're out in front of it. You got a plan in place, you got a timeline in place, you have a dates. Policy hearing and approval for schedule in November, so. It's good. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Dr. Robinson. Moving on to our next discussion item, which is the placement of Board of Education meeting dates set for January 2024. Dr. Luttrell?
Yes, on the meeting, on the board meeting calendar that was approved back in June, the January dates call for 2 meetings as usual. However, the first January meeting, which the second Monday currently does have that meeting being a 7 a.m. meeting at one of our schools, and the fourth Monday meeting being a 7 p.m. regular meeting here at the District Administrative Center. And really viewing that closer, Candy and Rachel caught it, and that January date, the first meeting date, second Monday, is the date that the new board members would be given the oath. And so my recommendation would be that the board swap those 2 meetings and have the first meeting in January, that second Monday, be the PM meeting here at District Administrative Center in the evening. That way people can come, bring their families, anybody that wants to watch, and then have that second meeting be the one at, I believe it's at Forest Spring. So
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it's a good recommendation to switch those 2 meetings. Any other questions or discussion on that? So I guess we can amend the calendar and
I can do that.
back as an action item. All right, moving on to our final discussion item is the facility use policy. Dr. Luttrell.
Yes, we have, again, we wanted to not put it forth for action yet because we want to make sure that we had considered all of the possible questions that, had been brought to us or submitted to us, and that everyone was comfortable with our facility usage policy. Mr. Delphia has worked, pretty intensely on this for several months. Dr. Robinson has also been alongside him. Since last meeting, we have addressed some questions that were submitted. I did include those there as part of your agenda item. And then, like I said, Josh and Collie are here to basically just kind of, again, give you an overview. But really, there is nothing new that in terms of what's in the policy than what was presented last month. But again, we're just here for discussion. Again, we're not asking for action. But Kylie, Dr. Robinson, if you all have any information you want to provide or overview, or just to kind of re-summarize, now's your opportunity.
Thanks. Thanks, Dr. Luttrell. Didn't think I'd be up here a third time discussing this, quite honestly, but it's third time's a charm, right? So I don't really have anything. My only question is, does the board have anything further they would like to see change with the policy is my only question. And whatever that is, we'll look at that and make a revision. In the next 2 weeks, we'll hopefully have an action item for you for the revision of the policy as a whole.
One thing I would make, or comment I would make before you get started, there were several questions in regard to the Spring Hill Rec. And I did have a chance to talk to Brian Peel. I think that's a conversation that needs to continue to happen. I'd also, Dr. Luttrell and I have been talking a little bit about getting some guidance from Greg Goheen as well, just as to what's been the past practice. But I think he's got some good questions. I think they are things that probably need to be addressed outside of our facility usage, at least initially, and may take some time to iron out a written agreement with the rec if that's the direction we choose to go. I think there's some good questions that have been raised, but I don't know that they're quick questions to answer.
Have you aligned this guide with the policy, the current policy? Because this is what we've been talking about is the guidance. It's a guide. We do have a policy. I know there's a lot of those intricacies about different topics. So we don't want to create conflict between those two.
I will look closer, and I'll have Greg look closer as well. I don't believe that the changes that were made this time should have impacted policy, but I'll go back and look. I know that question came up
Yeah,
Friday.
just, I think it's KG, if you could just verify that we haven't
Yeah,
created any conflicts and that they're in alignment.
yep, we can do that. And I think there were also some things that were just definitions that could be better defined. Things like holiday and I forget the others off the top of my head. There's some of those kind of things we can go through and do as well.
All right. Any other questions or discussion comments? Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Moving on to our board work calendar. Dr. Luttrell.
Again, just, you can take a look at that and see what's coming up in the meetings ahead. I did include there, just for review, last meeting, we did also kind of designate each of you to various site councils. And I did have Rachel and Candy put that list together and share that just so you would have that for reference. And you will get notification from the school directly whenever there is the appropriate site council meeting that is scheduled. I just put that there for you.
All right, very good. Moving on to Board of Education member reports. Any reports? Getting ready for school. I guess several of us attended the opening ceremonies today. It was fantastic. Well done. I know there's a lot of people who put a lot of hard work into it. Dr. Villarreal, thank you. I know you led a lot of that as well. So appreciate that. That was a lot of fun this morning. I think there's the theme for this year is I love it here. And I think it's a good way to build alignment and pride in the different schools that we have. A lot of great people working.
There was a tremendous amount of enthusiasm. My ears are still ringing.
Yeah, Spring Hill Elementary School, shout out, right?
They were very loud.
They're amazing. So you can always tell where they're sitting. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. Nicole, did you have any comments on?
I thought it was wonderful. I think that the opening ceremonies and the closing ceremonies are some of my favorite because you get to see our educators and our staff really their commitment to us. I mean, they come in and they're excited and it gets them all the games and things we do gets them going and eager and happy for that first day. And then when we're closing down, just how thankful we are for all their hard work. So I love this. This is one of my favorite things every year. So I thought it was wonderful. And for everyone, we all have these shirts, and the staff have them, and I'm very big on branding, and it makes you feel like a community and like you're part of something. And so everyone, I love that. I love all the little details that we're putting into it to really showcase our district. So thank you for all of that.
Brent, did you have any comments on this morning?
No, just, it was wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. Sharon.
Well, I think the board put quite a bit of work into the core values last year. And I thought it was great how they incorporate on the back of every t-shirt are the core values. There's a special icon that kind of shows that core value. And then the whole program was designed around the core values. So I don't know how anybody could walk away from there not feeling like we really are in a really great place. And I felt very fortunate to be where we are just by sitting there and being a participant. So thank you to everybody who put the work in. And Dr. Luttrell, your remarks were very touching as well.
Yes. I was very proud of the district. I mean, it's like sitting there and going, God, this is what we've got done. And then all the work everybody's put in, it was great.
Dr. Luttrell, thoughts on this morning?
Thought it went again very well. I felt a lot more comfortable this year, kind of knowing what to expect. But again, you just cannot say enough about our staff, everyone from Dr. Villarreal and his staff, Rachel, Mr. Elliott, Kylie, Tim, everybody, principals pulls together. And it is a lot of hours. That's how we say events like that don't just happen by chance. They take a lot of planning, a lot of people that have an aligned vision of what needs to be done, and it was done very well.
Yeah, I think we're at the beginning of yet another amazing school year. And so I think that it was just the energy to move things forward, move things along. So thank you again. Superintendent report.
Real quick, we just talked about the opening ceremony summary. I'll kind of save that. But then our first day of school is tomorrow. Everyone in the audience tonight, as well as those listening, always remember we ask for extra patience the first week, especially extra patience on that first day, especially with our school bus pickup and drop off times. As was said a couple months ago, our transportation department works very hard to make sure that we get students picked up, that we get them dropped off, we get them loaded correctly. But again, a lot of the information that they get may not get to them until the 11th hour. And it's a challenge. I guarantee that they're working right now in their offices on information that they may have gotten in for the weekend or even throughout today. So I always say that first couple of days, try to have, if you're riding the bus, have your child prepared, ready, a little bit earlier than normal. And in the afternoon, we will not leave the schools until we get students on what we think and know is the correct bus. You have a lot of those younger children, okay, especially the kindergartners, first graders. That first day, they may not ride in the morning. Their parents bring them. That's just part of tradition. So when the afternoon comes, they really don't have a clue. So it takes some extra time. And we don't, rather than just herd them on the bus, we make sure that our staff and teachers and drivers have them on the correct route. And so the afternoon routes especially, more than likely will be, quite a bit later than normal, but that will get in better and improve each day. So please be patient with us on that end. Also, as you've heard the last several years, speaking of our transportation department, they work very hard, but like all transport, bus drivers are a challenge. Right now, they can make the routes work, but we really don't have room for errors. So again, keep that in mind. Also, as you know, the crossing guards at many of our schools, and we have different municipalities that, we have Olathe, we have Spring Hill. Those are essentially the responsibility of that local city municipality to provide. And so, again, crossing guards also, are kind of a position that can be a struggle sometimes to fill. And I know that we've had some feedback and been in communication with the city of Spring Hill that their company they contract with, has indicated that they're, really pedaling fast to try and get those positions filled. And so again, we ask individuals again to be patient, but more than anything, anytime you're in and around a school zone, just, be extra cautious, try to make sure that you're at all times watching for other vehicles, watching for students, pedestrians. It's going to be a great school year on that front. We start tomorrow, and a little over 12 hours from now, first day will have started at most all of our campuses. The side note from that, a couple other items real quick. I mentioned last time that I had a meeting scheduled. That meeting did occur a little over a week ago with Johnson County Sheriff's Department and Captain Martinez, who is the officer that has oversight of school resource officers. And we talked about what a timeline might look like if the district would decide at some point to add to our existing SRO staff. We currently have 2 full-time positions, but now with the opening of Forest Spring and the fact that school safety is always in the forefront of individuals' minds. And we talked about that. And again, even though they are in a much better position a year now than they were this time last year, because, they were able to do some compensation adjustments within their department that allowed them to have more deputies. Their first priority, which is true, is for their road officers. And they have been able to have people come into their training classes, have graduated. They've got another class coming through. And of course, with the school resource officers, once you have identified someone, there's training that you want them to go through to get certification for that. He said right now, not to say that it would be set in stone, but he said just to be realistic, that if we were to, was to be a decision that was an avenue that we wanted to pursue, not that it couldn't be done sooner, but realistically probably be something that would not fully couldn't potentially not be in place till probably early 2024. The further I talked with Captain Martinez and looked at our current contract, it kind of presents a good opportunity right now, because we are currently in a 3-year agreement that we have with Johnson County Sheriff's Department for our school resource officers. That agreement, we are just now starting that 3rd year. So our 3rd year will be finalized at the end of the school year. So normally this fall, winter would be the time that we would start negotiating on the next cycle. And so if that is an avenue that we want to go, we could also start those discussions. And, if there were other possible adjustments, additions, enhancements that we wanted to make, that would be the time to have those discussions. But it's a good, productive discussion. I have visited with our 2 SROs also that we have do a great job, Officer Patchnick as well as Officer Ramos. And while they do a great job, now that we heard throughout now, we have kept adding facilities, new facilities. Our enrollment has increased. We do know they make a difference, and we probably, as Mr. Swin, there's a lot of challenges monetarily, but if there's a way that we can make it happen again while keeping still not impacting our overall mill, that probably is something that we probably might want to look more closely at. But if there's, the feeling that that's a discussion we want to kind of keep moving forward with, to kind of just continue to study, I'm more than happy to do that. But that was one. And then also want to throw out, you remember a couple of years ago, you all participated in a nationwide class action suit that was brought against the manufacturer of Juul, which is the vapor, cigarettes and that. As you know, we brought that case, was settled out of court. We did receive a settlement. This being a part of that, we signed on. It was no cost. When that same group of attorneys is now looking at, they haven't filed it, but is looking at a similar class action lawsuit against the social media companies. And they're trying to get information out and want districts to sign up, send me they can get. And if there's interest in the board as a whole of maybe getting more information on that, the representative from that firm is more than willing to come to one of our meetings in the near future if you'd like to hear more information on that. I do know the other 5 Johnson County school districts right now, they are all in varying degrees of discussion. I know that one district had it on their agenda for action tonight as a resolution, and a couple of the others are still trying to get possibly a visit scheduled for one of their future meetings. But I did include down there. No, I did not include that, but I do have a small handout that has some information, and I can get that out to you. And then a couple meetings ago, I also was requested that we maybe it would be good to see what were the in-service PD workshops for staff across the spectrum that they participated in. And I did include that there as an attachment of what our required workshops and in-service trainings were for staff. So that's my superintendent's report, and I'll entertain any questions.
So on the lawsuit information, you're gonna send us some more I mean, that's.
I got
it's pretty
a
broad.
small handout that
Okay, I mean, it's just broad. I mean, is it like towards one specific social media? What part of social media? Like, what is it?
it's
Okay,
It's mainly as of right now, their preliminary focus is on the main ones like
like TikTok or?
Facebook. You know, it's Facebook. I think TikTok is on there, and just
Okay.
it's kind of a pretty big mix. Of course, they're going to name as many as they can, and just
Yeah.
hope that they can get something to stick. But yes, I can get that out.
Was there a link in one of the communications to that?
There might have been. I'm not
I
sure.
I think there was, but it didn't work. So whatever you can send, it'd be
We'll
great.
definitely do that.
Okay.
And then, thank you for including the in-service training. If someone has questions, I did look through the list. If anyone has questions, I think it's nice to have those publicly posted as well. So I appreciate the effort to put that out. If they have questions about what something is, we just have them call you. Does that sound okay?
Yes. Fine.
Any other questions? We're adjourned. Thank you.